Hey there, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We're well into December, and that means it's time for the very last monthly Cape Coral real estate market update video of the year. I can't believe it's already well into December at this point, but if you're not familiar with these videos, I'm basically going to give you the rundown on all the statistics and the facts and the figures of the Cape Coral real estate market. And we're going to be specifically looking at numbers from this past month. So these are numbers that just came in November. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what the entire market looks like, and then we'll really start to break things down into individual categories. So we'll talk about non-waterfront single-family homes. We'll of course talk about Gulf access homes. I'm going to talk about freshwater canal and lake homes as well in this video, and then we're also going to touch on condos and townhomes before we wrap up with some advice if maybe you're a buyer in this current Cape Coral real estate market, or if you're a seller in the current Cape Coral real estate market. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a near 20-year full-time real estate broker. I live right here in Cape Coral, work right here in Cape Coral in Southwest Florida, and I do one of these videos every single month. These are longer form videos. They're kind of dry, but they're chock full of really great information and statistics if you are trying to keep tabs on what the Cape Coral real estate market is doing. But these videos are in addition to just weekly videos that I put out where we're either looking at some really fun real estate or we're covering some really useful and good information. So if you are interested in Southwest Florida and Cape Coral, maybe you're moving to Cape Coral or moving to Fort Myers or something like that, I want to invite you to go up there and hit the subscribe button so you can be around for these videos every week. I think you'll get a ton of great and useful information out of these videos, and yeah, would love to talk with you sometime. Of course, my contact information is right there. If I can help you with anything, if you are buying or selling anything, call, text, or email me anytime. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the Cape Coral real estate market. I always start with these videos with the lowest and the highest sales of the month in a few different categories. So let's get into this and talk about the lowest sales of this past month for November 2025. All right, so these are the lowest sales of the month of November 2025. I'm going to give you a few different categories. We'll talk about the lowest condo sale, and then I'll show you the lowest single-family home sale, as well as the lowest Gulf access home sale that happened last month. And as you can imagine, you know, November, as we get into the holidays, it's usually the real estate market kind of slows down. We don't see as many sales happen in the last couple of months of the year. As you can imagine, people really aren't shopping for real estate actively while they're visiting family and doing holiday stuff like that. So, but we got some interesting ones this month. Let's start off with the lowest condo sale. That's this one over in the southeast section of Cape Coral. This unit 4718 Southeast 5th Avenue, unit number 7. That's just at the basically at the corner of Country Club Boulevard and Cape Coral Parkway there in the southeast. It's in the Caribbean Breeze condo complex, which is a smaller condo complex down there in the southeast. But this unit was a smaller unit, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, just under 1,000 square feet of living area, built in 1982. And this thing was listed at $109,900. It was listed at $110,000 and sold just in 25 days for $93,000 cash. And once again, I think the last 3 or 4 months we've gotten under that $100,000 mark for condos. And as you're going to find out when we get into the statistical portion of this video, condos have been, more than any other category, they've come down in price significantly in the last couple of years, and so we're seeing more of these under $100,000 sales, and it represents really, I think, an opportunity for a lot of folks to get in because like this condo right here, I mean, this is a pretty clean condo. It's certainly needed to be updated and things like that, but for all intents and purposes, it looked like it was basically move-in ready, and it's right there near the downtown area. Now, the one thing that probably drove the price down on this one was the monthly HOA fees. The monthly HOA fees in this complex was $669 a month, and in spite of a lot of increases that we've seen in the HOA fees, that's pretty much on the high side for these regular condos in the Southeast Cape Coral. But you know what? Congratulations to the buyers and the sellers. $93,000 for a condo like this looked to be a pretty darn good deal, and again, that thing sold in just 25 days. So there are definitely some opportunities out there in the condo market. We're going to get into that here in just a little bit. All right, let's look at the lowest single-family home sale of the entire month, and that was, again, over in the southeast section of Cape Coral, 2709 Southeast 17th Place. That's just south of Veterans Parkway, and this one's east of Del Prado Boulevard. This is a direct Gulf access neighborhood, although this particular property was not on the water like that. And this home, was pretty beat up inside. I'll just be honest with you. It was listed at $174,900 and sold just in 21 days for $160,000. It was an all-cash sale, but this property was just under 1,400 square foot, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, built in 1968. And, that's a great area over there, but, a 1968 home in this area where there's a lot of direct Gulf access homes around there. It's in the AE flood zone, and I'm sure the flood insurance numbers on this house were quite high. But nevertheless, $160,000, once you get under that $200,000 mark, you can't really complain too much about the flood insurance because that's a pretty solid, good deal. And as we'll see when we get into the median prices of these off-water single-family homes, this is significantly less there. And although this one was really beat up, and it also included a PACE loan balance that the new buyer had to pay off. They just put a new roof on that house using a PACE loan, and that was transferred over to the buyer. So maybe you can add another $15,000 or so on top of that $160,000 price. But nevertheless, great area over there. Looked like quite a bit of work needed to be done in this house, but congrats to the buyers and the sellers. $160,000 was the lowest single-family home sale for the entire city of Cape Coral for the entire month of November 2025. Let's do a fun one real quick. Let's get into the lowest Gulf access home that has sold this past month. And you might recognize this property if you're a subscriber to this channel, 1414 Shelby Parkway. Once again, we are in the southeast section of the city, just south of Veterans, and this time we're just to the west of Del Prado Boulevard, so it's on the other side of Del Prado from where that single-family home that we just looked at was. This home was listed at $340,000. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square foot home. It had a pool, believe it or not, built in 1969, and it's just a really good area over there. This is a Gulf access home, but it's not in that AE flood zone, so it's a nice little street over there, Shelby Parkway. And this one was just small. It didn't look like there was too much wrong with this property. Maybe a little bit dated, certainly a little bit small, but overall it looked to be in pretty decent shape. And certainly it had that pool there. And I actually did a video that featured this one amongst a few others maybe a month or two ago. It was listed at $389,000. And they dropped it to $340,000, and once they made that price reduction, it sold in 4 days, right at list price. $340,000 cash is where this one sold. So certainly, congrats to the buyers and the sellers on that. Even though this one was only 1,200 square foot and 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, maybe a little bit older in 1969, the fact that it was a pool home on a really decent Gulf access canal, and it wasn't in that AE flood zone, makes this a really, really solid buy. So congrats to the buyers and the sellers on the lowest Gulf access home sale of the month of November 2025. $340,000 hit the mark this past month. All right, let's get over to the fun ones and look at the highest sales of the month of November. Okay, highest sales of the month of November 2025. We'll do the same categories in a little bit different order, but let's start off with the highest condo that sold last month. The last few months, I think the highest condo sales were like maybe 400s and 500s. There wasn't too many higher end condos that have sold in the last few months, but that's not the case here for November 2025. Let's take a look at this one, 6061 Silver King Boulevard, Unit 306. This is in the high rises over in Tarpon Point Marina down there, just to the east of Cape Harbor in the South Cape. This is a beautiful waterfront high-rise. These units are absolutely enormous. This one was almost 3,100 square feet of living area inside, 3 bedrooms plus a den, 3.5 baths. These units were built in 2007, and this one was listed for $1.2 million, and it was only on the market for 28 days. And surprisingly enough, it sold for $960,000, so a $240,000 discount. It's fairly rare to see when it's only been listed for 28 days. So this was an all-cash sale. It's got huge, great views in there. Obviously, everything inside was really nicely updated, and this one was also sold fully furnished. These units are just incredible out there. Usually when one of these units sells, it's usually one of the highest sales of the month in terms of condos for the city of Cape Coral, just because they're super large units, they're super high end, luxurious, and they've got great water views down there. And they've got a pretty big HOA fee that goes along with it. It works out to about $1,630 a month for these units, but it gets you a lot there. There's a lot of really nice amenities in Tarpon Point, and certainly congratulations to the buyers and the sellers. $960,000 was the highest condo that sold in the month of November 2025. All right, let's take a look at the highest. You know, as you can imagine, every month the various highest overall sale is almost always a Gulf access home. They're just tremendously more valuable types of properties. And so let's look at the highest non-Gulf access home that's sold, and that's this one right here, 1109 Southwest 6th Avenue. This is in a great neighborhood down there in the southwest, just east of Skyline Boulevard, right on Lake Alhambra. This is a freshwater lake home. It's not brand new construction. It was built in 2016, but pretty good size house, 2,530 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 full baths, had a beautiful pool package on it, and just stunning views. It had a nice big pier kind of style dock that goes out into the lake there. And this thing was listed at $1,250,000, and it sold for $1.19 million, all cash. Once again, all the sales have been all cash so far. And you know, this one's been on the market for a little while longer. In 212 days, they started at just under $1.5 million, and then kind of work their way down. It's oftentimes, I mean, when you've got a unique piece of property like this on a big lake like that, there's not too many homes like this out there, so sometimes it becomes a little bit tough to kind of accurately price these homes where you need to be to get them sold. So it makes sense that it was on the market a little bit longer. But boy, this had some nice views in there. Nice open kitchen, tile throughout everywhere, basically all updated and new. Incredible outdoor living spaces, outdoor kitchen and a pool, and that really excellent pier-style dock that goes out there into the lake. So congrats to the buyers on a great purchase there on Lake Alhambra in the southwest section of Cape Coral. $1.19 million was the highest non-Gulf access home sale of the month of November 2025 for the city of Cape Coral. All right, let's get to the fun one. You know, the highest Gulf access home sale, again, is almost always the highest overall sale for the entire market for any particular month. And last month, we had a sale of $4.7 million, and that was the first one we'd seen get up over $4 million, I think, maybe since the beginning of the year. I think there may have been one or two that sold earlier in the year, but this month it was a fair amount less. This was the highest sale of the month, 809 Miramar Court. This is over in the Yacht Club neighborhood in the Southeast Cape. Excellent Gulf access waterfront, direct Gulf access down there. And you know, this is the neighborhood where development was started back in the late 1950s and early 60s. So we see mostly older homes in this area, and I'm almost certain that this particular lot had maybe a 1960s or even a 1950s home on it, and at some point they went in there and knocked that down and then built this brand new construction marvelous home. But this one was, again, brand new construction custom home, 3,146 square feet of living area, 4 bedrooms plus a den, 4 full bathrooms, incredible outdoor living spaces with an outdoor kitchen, big paved captain's walk along the waterfront in the back, a nice brand new metal roof. And again, this is direct access, probably only 5 minutes out to open water from here, so really top-notch waterfront there. But this was listed for $2.195 million, and sold in just a month and a half. 45 days is all that it was on the market, and it closed once again an all-cash sale, $2,072,000, so $2.072 million, and it just ticked up north of $2 million, and that was the highest Gulf access home sale and the highest overall sale for the city of Cape Coral for the month of November. I fully expect we'll see a lot more of these $2+, maybe $3 and $4+ million sales as we get into the first and second quarter of the year. Usually these higher end homes, they have a tendency to sell quite a few more of these in the first and second quarter of the year. So February, March, April, May, even June, we see a lot of these higher end waterfront sales. So I fully expect that we'll see some sales in excess of this $2.1 million mark. But congrats to the buyers and the sellers on this property over there on Miramar Court. Beautiful home, and that was the highest sale overall for the month of November 2025. All right, let's get into the statistics. I always start off with some general overall statistics of the entire real estate market here in the city of Cape Coral, and then we'll really start to divide these things up and break them down into a few different categories. So let's go ahead and get into those. Okay, so this is the statistics of the entire market, and we're specifically talking about residential properties. So these numbers that I'm about to show you include everything from single-family homes, both waterfront and non-waterfront. They include condos, townhomes, attached villas, things like that. Basically anything that's not commercial, certainly not multifamily, so we're not talking about duplexes or triplexes, and certainly not vacant land. So these are basically single residential units. In these statistics are going to include all of those in all different categories. And the charts that I'm going to show you go back to January of 2023, so a little bit beyond 2 years of data here. And let's start off with the total number of sales in the entire city for all categories of residential. Take a look at this chart. So we had 384 residential sales this past month. That's down from October's number of 462, but just like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you know, we're getting into the holidays. People are not actively shopping out there for real estate usually while they're busy traveling and doing family things and doing all the fun stuff that we all do during the holidays. So as you can imagine, those numbers generally come down in the last few months of the year, and then we really start to ramp up as we get past the first of the year and into the first and second quarter when our main buying season happens. And as you can tell on this chart, that's generally speaking when we see the highest volume of sales happen in those winter and spring months. But 384 is not bad for this time of year. If you go back 12 months to November of 2024, we'd only sold 332 properties that month. So we get roughly 52 properties more this year than we did in November of last year. And if you take it 2 years back, where maybe you would consider the real estate market to be a little bit better, back in November of 2023, we had sold 389. So our demand has been relatively strong this entire year, and certainly we've had a better off season this year than years past. So the summer months, as you can imagine, are usually just a little bit slower. Our seasonal residents are usually back up north at their summer homes, and we don't see as much buying activity happen in the second and third quarter that we do in the first and second quarter. But this year we've had a pretty strong second and third quarter, third and fourth quarter this past year in 2025. And if you take a look at the first 11 months so far in 2025, we sold a total of 5,185 residential properties. If you want to compare that to the first 11 months of 2024 and 2023, first 11 months of 2024, we had sold 5,271, so we're just 86 properties off the pace that we were last year by this time. Represents, if you want to look at it as demand, represents a reduction of demand of just 1.6%. So in spite of all the negative press and everything out there, we're still selling about the same number of properties as we have been the last 2 years. In 2023, the first 11 months, we'd sold fewer than we did in 24, so 5,242. So once again, we're just maybe 1.5 points shy of where we were the last couple of years. So again, demand has been pretty consistent over the course of the last 2 years in spite of some bad press and some high interest rates and all that kind of stuff. But those are the total number of market sales. Let's look at the median price, because the median price tells a little bit different story. And once again, here is the chart for median price. This is the overall median price, so this includes everything from that $93,000 condo all the way up to that $2.1 million brand new construction direct access home that we saw just a minute ago. So this is everything lined up from cheapest to most expensive, and the number right in the middle. So median price this last month, the median price actually ticked up the last 2 months. $375,000 was the overall Cape Coral real estate market median price this past month. That's up from $364 in October and $355 in September. So we've had a couple of months in a row where the median price has actually risen. Now, I don't necessarily think you should take that to mean that we've bottomed out and we're on our way back up. I think these numbers tend to just kind of fluctuate from month to month depending on how many of a certain type of property ends up selling a certain price category. So we've kind of wavered a little bit. You can tell the overall trend over the last 2 years has been a very gradual low step down, and I think that's a needed and quite frankly the best case scenario market correction that we could have seen down here in Southwest Florida, considering what we went through post 2020 and that big price ramp up that we saw very, very quickly, where the prices increased dramatically over the course of just maybe a year or two. So we needed that market to kind of cool off. We needed things to do it slowly. We needed that cool off to happen slowly, and it's happened over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. But if you just want to take this $375,000 median price number this past month and compare it to the last couple of years, you know, November of 2024's number was $386,000. So we're only $11,000 lower median price-wise, at least comparing directly month to month from where we were this time last year. That represents a decrease in median price of 2.85%. If you want to take it back to November of 2023, it was exactly the same as in 24. It was $386,000. And if you notice this chart, we've had a little more noticeable decline in the last 12 months versus the previous 12 months. So this overall price correction has happened more significantly in the last 12 months than you might see in the previous 12 months. But you know, you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit here. I don't think that means in the last 12 months we've only seen price decreases of 2.85%. We had a couple of months here recently where the median price has kind of ticked back up. I think if you were to read between the lines on this thing, you know, the high point on this chart was May of 2023 where it hit $410,000. So if you take that number and you take maybe last month's number of 364, you know, we've corrected somewhere around 10%, maybe 12% in the last two and a half years. And I think that's a little bit better indication of what that correction actually looks like. I think maybe 8 or 9% of that was really in the last 12 months. So we've seen there's some good things on the horizon that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. But I think overall, this was really the best case scenario for this real estate market that we could see in terms of that correction. It happened very gradually over the course of a few years. And now things are looking a little bit better. And one of the reasons that the last 12 months we saw that median price go down as much as we did was because of this chart. This is the inventory. So these are number of active listings on the market in any given month. This doesn't mean that there were this many properties listed at that month. It just meant at some point there were this many actives on the market. Some of them sold, some of them went off the market, some of them expired. So you take all of the ones that actually had an active status at one point or another during the month, and that gives you these numbers right here. So take a look at this chart. So again, this is the inventory going back to January 2023. We had 3,599 active listings on the market at some point last month in November. That's down from 3,615 in October, and in September we had 3,625. So we gradually stair-stepped down the last few months, but take a look at that huge decrease that we saw. You know, we peaked out. We had a significant amount of inventory on the market here in Cape Coral early this year. The inventory kind of was getting out of hand there, and that's why we saw the price reductions that we did. But February was the high point on this entire chart. February 2025, we had 4,977 active listings on the market at some point during February. So if you just look at the last 9 months, from February to November, we've taken 1,378 properties off the market. That represents 27.7% reduction in overall inventory. And that's just remarkable. We've been talking about this the last couple of market reports. It's just absolutely remarkable that we've been able to take that much inventory off the market. And really, I think it's one of the reasons that we're going to turn this market around a little bit faster is if we can get some of this extra inventory off the market. And you know, if you look at last year, the last 2 years really, inventory had started to pick back up when we got into November. Not the case this year. This has been the lowest that we've seen. 3,599 is the lowest month that we've had this entire year in 2025. And you know, hopefully that continues into December. I think it'll start to bump back up as it always does. And you know, maybe December, but certainly January and February. That active inventory will almost certainly raise. Now, at this point, I don't think it's going to get back to those huge numbers that we had at the beginning of this year. So that, to me, tells me we're kind of on the backside of this market cycle. And hopefully we can get a few more of these overpriced listings that have been sitting out there for a long time. We get a few of these off the market and continue to make some progress in turning that median price chart back around into an increasing trajectory. But nevertheless, 3,599 this past month. If you take it back to November of 2024, we had 4,050 properties on the market 12 months ago. So we're 11.1% down from where we were this time last year. And if you want to take it back all the way to 2 years ago in November of 2023, when the inventory was still increasing, there was 3,569 properties on the market back then. So we're just 30 above that number 2 years ago when nobody was really talking about how we had an inventory problem back then. So we've made significant progress on this inventory front in the last 9 months. Hopefully that continues. We are going to see it tick back up, like I mentioned, as we get into January, February, but hopefully as of right now, I don't see it getting back to those numbers that we saw earlier this year. And just to me, that indicates that, you know, we're making progress and we're kind of slowly turning this market around into a positive direction. So that's the overall market. Let's start to really break these down in some different categories. I always start off with the largest category that we have here in the city of Cape Coral, and that's off-water single-family homes. It makes up the vast majority of the home sales that we see here in the city of Cape Coral. So let's get into those now. Okay, so off-water single-family homes, this is by far the largest category in the entire city of Cape Coral. It represents the vast majority of our sales in any given month, and we're going to look at some of the same criteria here. So let's start off with the total number of sales this past month. Again, we're talking about November 2025. This chart goes back to January 2023. Let's take a look. We had 239 off-water single-family home sales this past month. That's down once again from October's number of 291. But again, we're just getting into the time of the year where these sales tend to just kind of drop off as people are busy with the holidays. So it's not tremendously surprising at all that it dropped down from 291 to 239. Once again, if we look back 12 months to November 2024, that number back then was 227. So we're doing better this past month than we did in November of 2024. If we go to November of 2023, there were 263 sales in this category that month. So we're just about 30 or so, 25, 30 off the mark from where we were 2 years ago. So once again, we're keeping up generally the same pace in this category that we have the last 2 years. If you look at the first 11 months of the year, so January through November of this year, we've sold 3,259 properties in this category. Last year we sold 3,493 in the first 11 months of the first 11 months of 2024. So we are down 234 sales this year based on the pace that we set last year. That represents a reduction of about 6.7%. And you know, that's significantly more than the overall market. And I think really the driving force behind that is we're not having as many new construction sales. In 2023 and 2024, we had a lot more new construction product out there. They were selling a lot more new construction homes. They were offering a lot of financing incentives and closing costs paid and things like that. And it just hasn't made as much sense for those production builders to build as many homes. The demand for those new construction homes has gone down as the resale prices have come down to the point where they just frankly outcompete what those builders are able to build those homes for. So I think the reduction of, if you want to look at it as demand in this category, the reduction of 6.7% over the last for this year from last year, I think almost entirely has to do with the smaller number of new construction sales that we've seen. So 2023, the first 11 months, a similar situation, 3,516 sales back then, so we're down 257 sales off of 2023's pace. But again, I wouldn't read a whole lot into that. We're just seeing fewer and fewer of those new construction sales as the production builders really kind of step down their level of production for those new construction homes. But let's look at the median price, because once again, you know, the trend has been very consistent over the last 2 years. We had a median price reducing at a very slow but steady pace over the course of the last 24 or 30 months or so, from January 23 to November 2025. But the median price this last month for single-family homes that are not on the water, $335,000. That's down from $340,000 in October. And once again, this is a little more consistent chart than we've seen in some of the other categories. So I think you can take these numbers a little more accurately versus some of the other ones where we kind of have to read between the lines because the numbers jump up and down month to month. But $335,000 this past month, if you compare that to November of 2024's median price number for this category, it was $369,000. So we're down $34,000 in terms of median price this past month versus median price in November of 2024. That represents a price correction of about 9.2% just in the last 12 months. So a little more exaggerated in this category versus the overall real estate market. But if we take this back to, again, a lot of this price correction has happened in the last 12 months versus the previous 12 months. November 2023's number was $370,000 on this chart. And the high point on this entire chart was February of 2023 when the median price hit $385,000. So if you just go back to that and take the price correction that we've seen from February of 2023 to November of 2025, we're down about $50,000 or about 13% from where we were at the high point on this chart in February of 2023. So again, a gradual but consistent drop in overall median price. And I think that trend may continue. I think it's going to definitely slow down because we've seen these inventory numbers kind of come down. But maybe we've got a couple more points to go before it really rounds the corner and starts heading back up in the next, or in the opposite direction over the course of the next 12 months or so. But we'll keep an eye on this one. It'll be interesting to see what really January is again going to be a slow month, so I wouldn't take too much consideration in January's number. But we really get into February and we see a high number of these sales start to happen. That'll give us an indication of where we're at, if we're kind of flattening off in that pricing, or if we're kind of turning the corner and maybe even heading in the other direction. I don't necessarily think that we're going to be heading in the opposite direction in the near term, but who knows? Maybe in the next 6 months we might see that things kind of turn around depending on what we can do with the inventory. But let's look at the inventory for off-water single-family homes. Again, this chart goes back to January 2023. Let's take a look. Once again, just like I mentioned with the overall market stats, these doesn't mean there are this many properties on the market at any given time. This just represents the total number of active listings that were on the market at one point or another during that month. So some of these homes sold, some of them expired, some of them were terminated and taken off the market completely, and things like that. So just keep that in mind where we're talking about these numbers. But we had 1,979 active listings on the market at some point during February of 2024. And once again, that's down, been very consistently down since this high point on this chart, which was, again, February 2025. But October's number was 2,011. September's number was 2,033. So we've slowed down in terms of the rate of reduction that we've seen in this inventory, but we're still going in the downward direction, which is incredibly good news because the last couple of years, by this time in the year, that inventory had started to kind of come back up. It generally dips down as we get into the slower months of the summer and the fall, and then it starts to ramp up as we get towards our main buying season, which is obviously basically January through June. But again, we've just taken so much inventory off the market since the high point on this chart. We go back just 9 months to February of 2025. There was 2,730 of these properties on the market at some point during February. So we've taken 751 of these off-water single-family homes off the market just in the last 9 months. That represents a 27.5% overall reduction in inventory, which is an incredible amount to have happened in just a short time like that. If you want to compare these to the last couple of years, November of 2024's inventory level was 2,336 of these properties. So we're down almost 15.5%. from where we were this time last year. So we've made a lot of progress. And I fully expect these numbers to kind of tick back up a little bit as we get into the main season, just because that always happens no matter what the market is doing. To what extent, I don't know yet. If I had to gauge my gut feeling at this point, I don't think we're going to hit those high points that we saw this past year unless it just really takes us by surprise and that inventory explodes all at once. The trend is, it's come down, and a lot of this inventory that was maybe overpriced, that had been sitting out there for a long time. Maybe these sellers kind of got it through their heads. They're not going to get their numbers that they were going to get in 2021 or 2022. And so maybe it's time to either price it where they need to price it to sell it, or go ahead and take that thing off the market and kind of wait this market cycle out. If you go back 2 years to November of 2023, when once again nobody was talking about us having an inventory problem back then, there was just under 2,100, 2,095 of these properties on the market. So we're still down 5.5% from where we were in November of 2023. I just think that's the biggest story. If you want to take one thing away from this hour-plus long video, it's that the inventory levels have come down in a significant way in the last 8 or 9 months, and that's very, very good news, particularly if you're a seller and you've been watching this very closely to see when this market's going to kind of turn around and go back maybe in your favor a little bit. So tremendous amount of progress we've made in this category, and we'll really keep an eye on that inventory to see how much it's going to go back up as we get into January, February, March. But like I said, at this point, if I had to guess, I don't think we're going to hit those fresh highs that we saw earlier this year, which to me, that tells me we've kind of rounded a corner on this particular market cycle. But that basically wraps things up for off-water single-family homes. Let's jump over and do everybody's favorite category, and that's Gulf access homes. Let's take a look at those. All right, this is the fun one, the Gulf access real estate. We're very well known for our Gulf access real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. We have more of this type of property than virtually anywhere else in the city, or I'm sorry, in the state of Florida, really. So when I talk about Gulf access, I'm mostly talking about homes that are on a canal that has boating access out to the Gulf of America. So these are, also included in this are riverfront properties, so big water properties, but there's not as many of those sales. Most of these sales that occur are on those Gulf access canals, so just keep that in mind. Again, let's start off with the total number of sales. Gulf access properties, just like condos and townhomes, it's really a category that is much more active in the first and second quarter of the year. The total market's a little more active in the first and second quarter of the year, but particularly this category and particularly condos and townhomes, we see a lot more of those sales happen in the first 6 months. It's very much a seasonal resident product, so retirees and things like that. This particular category is the most expensive category that we have, so a lot of those folks maybe have 2 properties, and as such, they're just more active when they're down here during the nice temperate winter months that we have here, and not so many of these sales occur when those folks are back up north enjoying their summer residences. But let's take a look at the chart for total number of sales. Again, this chart goes back to January 2023. This past month, November of 2025, we sold 58 Gulf access properties. That's once again down from October's number of 82. October, that's a pretty high October. 82 was a pretty substantial number of sales for that time of year. We don't see 82 sales in October very often, but 58's roughly, it's actually a little bit better than the last couple of years. If you want to take it back 12 months and look at November of 2024, we only sold 51 Gulf access homes back then, so 7 more versus this time last year, and pretty similar in November of 2023. We only sold 50. So 8 more than November in 2023's number. But let's look at the overall production that we've put up this entire year so far. It's in the first 11 months of 2025, so January through November, we've sold 817 Gulf access homes. If you want to compare that to the first 11 months of 2023 and 2024, the first 11 months of 2024, we only sold 804. So we've sold 13 more Gulf access homes this year versus the first 11 months of 2024. It represents about a 1.6% increase in overall demand if you want to look at it like that. And if you talk about 2023's number, the first 11 months of 2023, we'd only sold 768. So we've sold 49 more this year than we did during that same time period in 2023. It represents about a 6.4% increase in overall demand versus 2023's numbers. So this is the one category we're actually doing better this year, at least in terms of the number of sales, versus 2024 and 2023. So we've had a little bit more activity in the Gulf access home market this past year so far. But let's look at the median price, because I'm going to give you this median price chart. Keep in mind, when we're talking about 67 or 58 or 51 properties or even 82 property sales in any given month, that's obviously going to make that median price fluctuate quite a bit from month to month. So you kind of have to read between the lines when I show you this chart. But let's go ahead and look at this chart. Again, we're going back to January 2023. But the median price for those 58 Gulf access home sales this past month was $672,500. That's up from October's number of $632,500. But again, you can see on this chart, it jumps up and down quite a fair amount. There's a tremendous amount of discrepancy there from month to month, so you kind of have to almost average these things out. For instance, if we go back 12 months ago to November of 2024, that was actually the lowest median price month on this entire chart. It got down to $650,000. Does that mean because we're sitting at $672,500 this past month that Gulf Access home prices are going up? I don't think so. I think you just kind of have to read between the lines a little bit. But if you take it back 2 years ago, the median price in November of 2023 was $747,500. So if you just take that value versus the value that we had this past month, that represents a $75,000 reduction in 2 years. It's about 10%. But of course, the high point on this chart was February of 2024, believe it or not, when it got up to $852,500. So if you use that number and compare it to this past month, we've come down $180,000 in the last 2+ years or so. In any case, I think, like I said, you have to read between the lines on this thing. I really think if you average these numbers out, we've probably had a correction of around 15 to 18% over the course of the last 24 months in the average Gulf Access home. In other words, if you had the same property on the same canal, what it would sell for in November of 2023 versus November of 2025, you can probably guess that it's around 15 to 18% less now than it was 2 years ago. And I still think that represents a pretty healthy correction considering it happened over the course of 2 years. So just keep that in mind. But I think overall, the prices have come down. There's a lot of opportunity out there for Gulf Access homes. We've had to deal with some flood insurance issues, and there's some things to navigate with that. And certainly I have videos on this channel where we talk about flood insurance and really give you kind of the inside information to that and sort of the things you need to look out for. So if you're welcome, especially if you're a subscriber, you can go back and look at some of those videos. I think I'll be doing some more where I'm talking about flood insurance in the near future. So make sure you are subscribed if you're not subscribed. But definitely the median price has come down again, I think 15 to 18% basically over the last 2 years. But let's look at the inventory, because once again, in this category, it's probably been more than any other category. We've seen the largest number of properties come off the market in the last 6-9 months. But let's take a look at this. Again, these numbers that I'm giving you for inventory, these are active listings that were on the market at some point during the month. So it doesn't mean that there were this many properties actively on the market at any given time. It just means, we had that many active listings at one point or another. So some of them sold, some of them expired, some of them were terminated. Just keep that in mind. But the total number of actives that we had on the market at some point during the month of November was 731. And that was actually ticked up from October's number. We had 715 properties on the market in October, and September's number was 729. So we've come up a little bit just in the last month or so. And that's to be expected. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, Gulf Access properties are really, really active in the first 6 months of the year. So we see a lot more of these properties come on the market when more buyers are in town actively shopping for this type of property. So we'll see that inventory number tick up again. But my gosh, I mean, look at this. The high point on this entire chart was actually April of this year versus the overall market was in February. This peaked out in April, and we had over almost 1,100 of these properties on the market in April, 1,096. So we've taken 365 Gulf Access homes off the market just in, what is that, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 7 months. 7 months, 365 properties. That represents a 33.3% reduction in inventory in just 7 months. That's absolutely incredible. And frankly, it was absolutely needed if we were going to kind of turn this market around sooner than later, because those inventory levels were not sustainable, at least at the given price points that we had. But if you want to compare this to the last couple of years, November of 2024, we had 793 properties on the market. So we've taken about 7.8% of the inventory off just from November to November, just in the last 12 months. It represents a reduction of about 62 homes off the market, which is great. And if you look back 2 years ago, when inventory again was still pretty low, November of 2023, we had 702 properties. So we're really only 29 homes off the mark from where we were in November of 2023. So we're only up about 4.1% over the course of 2 years. So we kind of really raised up really quickly. And I think once we started to get a little bit of negative press and people kind of got it through their heads that these prices were softening, some of these sellers that didn't need to sell and maybe had these properties on the market for a long time at a too high of a list price. They kind of figured it out and got it through their heads they weren't going to get their numbers, and so they've taken their properties off the market. We certainly haven't sold more properties that had come on the market enough to get this 33.33% off the market in the last 7 months. A lot of this has to do with sellers getting out of the market altogether because they realized they weren't going to get their numbers. But that absolutely needed to happen for us to turn this thing around a little bit quicker. So inventory is looking really, really good. Again, I fully expect the inventory levels to come back up as we get into January and February and March. To what extent, I don't know yet. If I had to guess, I don't think we're going to hit those highs that we saw earlier this year. So it really seems like we've rounded a corner in this category along with all the others in terms of trying to slow this price correction down a little bit and start to flatten out and turn things back around. So we're heading in the right direction. Hopefully we can maintain this kind of trajectory as we get into the first quarter of next year. But make sure you tune into these videos every month so you can keep tabs on what's going on with Gulf Access Homes as well as all the other categories. But that's the story with Gulf Access Homes here in the city of Cape Coral, Florida for December of 2025. Make sure you stay tuned in future videos because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening in the Gulf Access home market in the months to come. But let's get over to condos and townhomes. Condos and townhomes have been really kind of taking it on the chin the last couple of years, and you're going to see why here in just a minute. Let's take a look at those. Well, I meant to do freshwater homes before condos and townhomes, but I said it on the last segment, so we're going to do condos first, and then we'll jump over to the freshwater, canal, and lake homes. So condos and townhomes, like I just mentioned, condos and townhomes, it's been the worst category in terms of the price corrections that we've seen over the last couple of years. I think that just has a lot to do with the fact that the HOA fees, the monthly and quarterly HOA fees that these properties have gone up a fair amount in the last year or two. That has a lot to do with increases in insurance costs, and also in some situations there's some new requirements, especially for condos that are 3 stories and above, where they're required to do periodic structural reviews, structural and engineering reports on the properties just to make sure they're structurally sound, and they're also required to have a higher amount of reserves set aside for structural repairs and things like that. So I think the increase in the monthly HOA fees is one of the main drivers of why the condo market has been the softest out of all of the categories. But let's jump into this. Start off with the number of sales, again, going back to January 2023 on this chart. We had 31 sales this past month, in the month of November 2025. That's down from 34 in October. Again, just like Gulf Access Homes, this category is a very seasonal product. So we see a few more sales, as you can kind of see the spikes on this chart in the springtime. A lot of these folks that own these condos, they are seasonal folks, so they're down here during the winter and they're not here during the summer months. And as a result, there's a lot more buying activity that happens in basically the first 6 months. Definitely, March, April, May is kind of the big ones that we have for condos and townhomes here. But if you want to compare that to the last couple of years, you go back to November of 2024, we only sold 20 condos back then. It was a really slow month back last year, 12 months ago. If you look at November 2023, we sold 38, so we're not too far off the mark at 31 this past month. In terms of just the overall activity this year, we've actually done a little bit better this year for condos than we did last year. The first 11 months of the year, we've sold 459 condos in the city of Cape Coral. First 11 months of 2024, we'd only sold 428. So we've sold 31 more properties this year versus 2024. It represents an increase in demand, if you want to consider it like that, of about 6.3%. Now, if you look at the first 11 months of 2023, we had sold 490. So we sold more in 2023. And that really makes sense. That was kind of before, really the end of 2023 is when we started to see those HOA budgets go up and those monthly HOA fees kind of start to increase noticeably. It was really in the wake of Hurricane Ian in 2022. So we're about 31 properties less this year versus 2023. It represents a reduction of about 6.3%. So we sold 6.3% more this year than last year, but we sold 6.3% less this year versus 2023, if that makes sense to you. So, and take a look at this median price chart. Let's look at those. This is why I say this is the category that's kind of taken it on the chin more than any other category in terms of this price correction, this market correction that we've seen here. We had a big spike in median price, and once again, just like Gulf Access Homes, when you're talking about a monthly sale number of only 31 properties or 20 properties or 38 properties, you're going to get a high discrepancy in terms of the median price in any given month. So you have to kind of read between the lines here, but the overall trend obviously on this chart is that we've been going down for the last 24 months or so. But the median price last month was spiked up to $244,990, so basically $245,000, but that was up significantly from October's number. October's number was under $200,000, $192,500, and we had 3 months there where we were, fairly under $200,000 in terms of the median condo price. But once again, you kind of have to average these out. If we take that 244.9, 245 number and compare it to November of 2024, median price back then was 289.5, so we're down about 15.4% just from that number to this number. Represents a reduction of about $44,500. If we go to November of 2023, it was all the way up to 291. The median price was 291,000. I think back then, if you average these out, the median price was somewhere around the 270,000-ish mark, and I think right now, if you kind of discount the fact that we had a pretty big spike this past month, I think the real median price is probably somewhere in the $200,000 level. So if you average all of those out over the course of the last 2 years, I still think that represents a price correction in the condo market of about 26%. And if you're a condo seller, that's a really tough pill to swallow. But if you're somebody who's in the market right now, especially for condos, represents a huge opportunity to get in there. And I also like to speak to folks that are maybe first-time home buyers. Maybe you're just getting out of high school, maybe you're just getting out of college, and you're looking at these single-family home price numbers and you're saying, I can't afford that. You might think about condos, because if you can get in there to a condo, in some cases like we're seeing under $100,000, even if you're financing that, even if those HOA fees are maybe $400 a month, those HOA fees cover a lot for you. They cover a lot of your structural insurance. They cover a lot of course, your lawn care and things like that, and pest control and different things. Some of them even cover basic cable television and internet. They cover a lot. So even if you think that monthly HOA fee is a little bit high, if it's $400 a month or something, keep in mind if you bought a single family home, you're going to have a lot of those costs anyway. So it represents a really strong opportunity, especially for first-time home buyers. If you're priced out of the single-family home market, maybe get into the condo market, because you can get in there and start participating when this market inevitably turns around, and you can start to build yourself some equity and get yourselves all the perks of home ownership. So I think this, 26% over 2 years, it represents a pretty significant opportunity for the folks that are out there buying condos right now. And you might look into that if you haven't, because there are some significant opportunities out there. But let's look at the inventory. In terms of the condo inventory, again, we've seen quite a bit of reduction in the last, 6-8 months or so. Maybe not as much as some of the other categories. Certainly, Gulf Access Homes have come down quite a bit more than just about any other category. But take a look at this. So we had 455 condos on the market this past month. That's actually up from October's number of 438. And September, we were down at 427, but we've still taken 125 properties off since the high point on this chart, which was March of 2025. We had 580 condos on the market back in March. So we've represents a reduction in inventory of 21.6% just in the last 8 months. So incredible amount of progress has been made on the condo front as well. If you take that 455 number in terms of the active listings this past month and compare it to 2024, in November of 2024, we had 488 properties. So again, we're doing better now than we did 12 months ago. Represents about 6.8% reduction just in the last 12 months. Of course, if you go back to November of 2023, there were 427, so a few less back then, but we're still only about 6.6% more now than we were back in November of 2023, and people weren't really talking about the inventory issues back then. The condo market was actually still pretty strong in 2023. A lot of the other categories, the pricing actually peaked out in spring of 2022. The median condo price actually hit their high point in spring of 2023. So Condo market was still fairly strong back in 2023, although it was starting to soften as we got into the later months of that year. But we still got some progress to make. This category, just like golf access homes, like I said, it's much more active in the first and second quarter of the year, so we'll fully expect to see these inventory numbers tick back up a little bit as we get into January, February, March. But at least if I had to call it right now, I don't think we're going to hit those high point numbers that we saw earlier this year, but we will just have to see. I still think the prices will still be fairly soft as we get into the season, but you know, who knows? The prices have gotten down to the point where we may see an explosion of condo sales here in the next 6 months. We'll just have to find out. So make sure you tuned in to this video every single month so you can keep tabs on the condo market. But that wraps things up for condos and townhomes. Let's jump over to what I thought I was going to cover on this segment, and that is freshwater canal and lake homes. I covered that last month. I wanted to cover it again this month, and we'll just kind of briefly run through the freshwater home market. So let's get into that. Okay, freshwater single-family homes. So these are mostly properties that are on freshwater canal systems. People are discovering the freshwater canal systems that we have in Cape Coral, and really you're about to see a chart that really shows you that. The number of freshwater homes that we have here in the city of Cape Coral, dozens and dozens, hundreds of miles of freshwater canal systems. They're connected to little lakes and things like that, and they represent a really great opportunity for people to get into a waterfront property here in Southwest Florida at a much lower price point. On average, they're about $250,000 less than the average golf access house. And you still can do a lot of fun things on these freshwater canals. You jet ski, you know, pontoon boats, you can go fishing. There's lots of nice fishing in the freshwater canals, certainly kayaks and paddle boards. There's a lot of fun to be had. And on top of that, most of these freshwater canal systems are not in that AE special flood hazard area. So even if you get a mortgage on these homes, oftentimes you're not going to be required to have flood insurance on them. And people are really starting to discover how nice these freshwater systems are here in the city of Cape Coral. They were really kind of hidden for a while, but people are figuring it out now. But let's look at the statistics. So let's start off with the number of sales. Take a look at this chart. Again, going back to January 2023, these are the monthly number of sales. We sold 56 of these freshwater canal homes last month. That's up from 55 in October. But look at the broader trend here. This is why I say, you know, people in the last couple of years are really starting to discover these freshwater homes. We've sold a lot more properties. The number of sales has been increasing over the last couple of years. And actually the first 11 months of the year so far in 2025, we sold 650 of these types of properties. If you look back at the first 11 months of 2024, we'd only sold 546. So we're up 104 properties this year versus the pace of last year. It represents about a 19% increase over that year's level. And if you look back 2023, we only sold 480 freshwater homes. So we've sold a full 170 more homes this year than we did in 2023 up to this point. And that represents an increase of about 35.4%. So a lot more of these freshwater homes are selling nowadays. And that's kind of a unique trend in this freshwater home segment that we really hadn't seen in some of these other categories. I just thought I would point that out to you. But if we just take the month to month here, again, 56 of these sales last month. In November of 2024, there were only 34. And in November of 2023, there were only 38. So I fully expect we'll see more and more of these freshwater home sales as we get into the later months of the year. But I just thought that was interesting. But let's look at the median price, because the median price, even though there's been more sales, the median price has definitely come down just like it has on every other category. And we had, we're not talking about a very big sample size here, 56 properties. So month to month, this number is going to kind of fluctuate quite a bit. But we did jump up a little bit last month. The median price for a freshwater home last month in November was $474,000. That's up from $417,000 in October. So you kind of have to read between the lines on this category, just like a few of those other ones. But just month to month, November of 2024, median price was $432,500. So I think it's come down a little bit. I don't think we've increased in price at this $474 number. It just means we've got to average that out a little bit. If you look back 2 years ago to November of 2023, the median price was $526,750. So if you just take that number and compare it to this past month's number, that represents about a 2-year price correction of $52,750, or about 10%. But like I said, I think you have to average these out a little bit, and I think we've got a 2-year correction for these freshwater homes of around 14 to 17%. I think that's roughly where the numbers lie once you kind of average all of these out. But again, we had a pretty strong median price point this past month, but I fully expect that'll probably go back down in once December's numbers come out. Let's look at the inventory. Inventory in this category, just like everything else, we kind of hit a high point in the spring, and we've come down tremendously in the last 9 months or so. We had 435 active properties on the market at some point in November 2025. That's down from October's number of 451. But the high point in this chart was March of this year. 600 of these homes were on the market in March. So we've taken 165 properties off the market in just 8 months. It represents a reduction in inventory of about 27.5% just in 8 months, which is really, really remarkable. You can see we always kind of come down in the summertime. Just like all categories, the inventory generally comes down a little bit as we get into the off season of the summer. But you can tell from 2024's trend, it came down a little bit, but nowhere near the level that we did this past year, or this year rather. And we had 433 of these homes on the market in November of 2024, so we're only 2 off that mark. November of 2023's number was 345, so we're still up about 29% or 100 properties from where we were 2 years ago. But again, the demand has also gone up fairly significantly from where we were in 2023. So, I still think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in these freshwater homes. More and more people are going to discover these, discover you can have a lot of the waterfront lifestyle that you want with these freshwater canal homes. I've got a beautiful property I just did a video on last week. Maybe some of you saw it. Beautiful property on a freshwater lake here in the northwest section of Cape Coral. It's just a tremendous property, and there's a ton of really cool things and lifestyle things that you can do on those freshwater canal systems and lakes. It doesn't get out to the Gulf, so if that's a high priority for you, maybe you need to stick to Gulf access. But if you're just looking for that waterfront lifestyle and you're looking to save on insurance, especially considering most of these properties you don't have to have that flood insurance, I really, really like the freshwater homes. I'm actually looking myself at getting into a freshwater home as my family grows and we kind of run out of space where we are here. So freshwater homes, I'm always going to like that. If you're interested in more information about that, certainly get a hold of me. I'll tell you all about those freshwater canal systems. But that wraps things up for freshwater single-family homes. That wraps up all of the categories we're covering today. I'm not going to cover the vacant lots this month. If you want me to cover it on next month, so let me know down in the comments. But let's jump over to advice. Let's start out with advice for some buyers, and then we'll get into some advice for sellers, and then we'll wrap things up with a nice summary of what the Cape Coral real estate market looks like right now. Let's get into it. All right, so if you're a buyer in the Cape Coral real estate market as it sits right now in December 2025, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be paying attention to and thinking about as we get into the end of the year here? Well, the big story, as it has been over the last few months, is the dramatic decrease in the level of inventory that we've seen here just in the last 7 or 8 months. Certainly, the inventory levels that we saw back at the beginning of this year were exorbitantly high. But it's really quite amazing to see how much has come off the market just in the last 6-9 months. Depending on the category, the inventory levels have come down almost 35%. So you certainly don't have the choice that you did 9 months ago. I still think the inventory level will kind of pick back up as we get into the main buying season, but demand will kind of follow that as well, and there'll be more buying competition out there. So you've really been in the driver's seat as a buyer for the last couple of years. It's been a pretty significant buyer's market. Certainly pricing has reflected that. We've seen in some categories like condos, pricing has come down as much as 25-26% in the last 24 months. So there's deals to be had out there. There's still deals to be had out there. And I still think pricing will remain fairly low for the foreseeable future. But it looks, for all intents and purposes, like we're rounding a corner with this particular market cycle. So if you've maybe been sitting on the sidelines and waiting to try to time the bottom of this market, you might start thinking about it right now. With those inventory levels coming down as far as they have and still trending to somewhat continue downward, we're going to see it tick back up once again. But I think overall, I don't think we're going to hit those fresh highs. So it looks to me like we've kind of rounded the corner on the inventory front. And certainly there are external forces at work that could really turn this market around very rapidly. And I'm talking specifically about things like if the state legislature gets the removal of property taxes for primary residents. If they get that on the ballot this next year in 2026, and it'll almost certainly pass as long as they get the verbiage right, that's going to create a heck of a lot of demand, and that's going to get priced out in the market one way or the other. And if I had to guess, it's going to get priced out by seeing a significant increase in demand, which is going to cause those prices to go back up. So I think in the near term, in the next 6 months, you're still going to have pricing somewhat on the same level that you do right now, and I think that's really your window of opportunity to kind of get in at the quote-unquote bottom of this particular market cycle. I don't foresee us going down another 10% in prices, not with the way the inventory has been behaving, and certainly our demand has remained very stable, and in some cases, like in Gulf Access Homes, we've sold more properties this year than we did last year. So you really ought to start thinking about getting into the market sooner than later if you're planning on buying a property here in Southwest Florida in the next couple of years. Certainly, if you are in that boat yourself, definitely give me a call, shoot me a text. Let's talk about it. I want to hear about your individual situation. We can talk about kind of how to strategize to put you in the right position to where you can kind of capitalize on where the market has come down to and get yourself the best deal, try to negotiate yourself the best price while this market is still soft. Because we are still Southwest Florida. It's beautiful right now. It's about 72 degrees here in the middle of December, and the sun is finally shining today. We had a cold front come through, and there were a few clouds there for a while, but it's nice right now, and that's why people want to be here. So the demand, the long-term demand for Southwest Florida real estate is always going to be very, very strong, because people want to live down here in this temperate climate and want to be next to the water. You want to be down here with the sunshine and the palm trees. So long term, this market has nowhere to go but up. We've experienced this kind of short little dip in this real estate market, which frankly we really needed. But it also presents an opportunity for the folks that plan to be here eventually to kind of get in at a pretty decent price point before these prices start to tick back up again. So that's my advice to you right now. I would kind of act sooner than later. Certainly give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear about your individual situation, and we can chat about how to get you in the right spot to kind of successfully exploit the way the market has been over the last couple of years and get you a good price on a property before this thing all the way turns around and we're seeing these videos where I'm talking about price increases month to month. So get a hold of me. Would love to hear from you, but that's my advice for buyers. The window's closing on trying to time the bottom of this market. It really seems like we're turning things around here in Cape Coral. All right, so if you're a seller in the current Cape Coral real estate market in December 2025, what is my advice to you? What do you need to be thinking about and paying attention to? Well, you've really been kind of at the short end of the stick, so to speak, in the last couple of years. It's been a strong buyer's market for the last 2 years, and buyers have really been in charge of this market, and that's why we've seen these prices soften the way that we have, in some cases 15, 20, 25%. Like in the case of condos, the prices have come down that much in just the last 2 years. So really what had been driving that had been the inventory levels, and so it's really good to see, especially if you're a seller, those inventory levels take a sharp, dramatic decrease over the course of the last 6, 8, 9 months. In some cases, like Gulf Access Homes, almost 35% of the properties have come off the market. Now we're going to see those inventory levels peak back up, or tick back up rather. I don't think we're going to see fresh highs that we did earlier this year. So that to me tells me we're kind of rounding a corner on this particular market cycle. Now the last thing that's going to turn around is going to be the pricing. So you've still got, at least in the short term, you've still got that pricing level is going to remain relatively consistent. I don't think we're going to see another 10% reduction in prices or anything like that, but pricing is still what is really driving this market. We've still had a pretty healthy demand all year, and in some categories like Gulf Access Homes, we've seen a higher demand this year versus last year, at least in terms of the number of sales. We had a higher number of sales this year than in 2024 and 2023. So if you are a seller, you definitely need to be pricing your property right. If you are pricing your property right, you're still selling it relatively quickly. I put one on the market at the beginning of this week, and by yesterday it sold. So 4 days on the market, sold, full price. We got it done. So price is definitely driving it. Beyond that, you just need to be competitive with how the property looks. You need to do everything you can to make that property pop and stand out from the other inventory that's out there, because there is still a lot of inventory out there. So make sure that drive up, when those buyers drive up into the driveway, make sure the front of that house looks tip top. Make sure that first 5 seconds of when they walk through that front door, the house smells good, looks good. is well lit. Everything looks really good because they're going to develop either a positive or a negative impression of that house within that first 5 minutes or 5 seconds, and it's very, very difficult to turn a buyer's first impression around once it's been made. So make sure your property looks in tip-top shape, but beyond that, you just need to be pricing that property right, and that's really the key to the success right now of getting these properties sold. You've got to get them priced right. You got to look at the market. You got to see what the other sales are doing. You got to anticipate what the next few months is going to look like in terms of that pricing. And you got to react accordingly. So if you are a seller in the current Cape Coral real estate market, or you plan to be in the next few months, get a hold of me, call, text, email me. Contact information's right there on the screen. I would love to hear about your individual property and give you an analysis on what we need to do to price that thing and get it looking perfect so we can get that thing sold, and hopefully, I don't know if we'll sell it in 4 days, but hopefully stronger than the market average right now, which is around 60, 90 days. So get a hold of me. Would love to talk with you. But yeah, it's still very much a buyer's market, but as a seller, you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with this inventory kind of turning around, and pretty soon we'll start to see that pricing turn back around, because again, we're still in the sunshine down here. We still got the water and the palm trees and the beautiful Florida winters down here. So long term, it's going to be just fine. There's always going to be people that want to be here in Southwest Florida and Cape Coral, and we just need to get through this particular market cycle. You were in the driver's seat there for a few years after 2020 when pricing really, really ramped up, and now it's the buyer's turn to have it for a couple of years. But it looks like for all intents and purposes, it's going to start turning around here. But definitely in the next at least 6 months, I would say the pricing will be relatively flat. So you need to make sure you price your property right, get it looking good. If you need my help, reach out, call, text, email me. I would love to help you, but that's my advice to sellers as it sits right now in December 2025. All right, so the summary of the market as it sits right now in December 2025, let's just kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it, especially if you didn't want to wait through all of that hour-plus amount of video content that I just gave you with all those statistics and everything like that. Let me just give you kind of the breakdown of what's going on right now. The biggest story for the last few months has been just the dramatic decrease in inventory that we've seen. The number of active listings out there have come down in some cases, in some categories like golf access homes, as much as 33% and more. That's a pretty significant amount to get off the market in just 6 or 8, 9 months. So that's a very, very good sign for the health of this overall real estate market. It's also a sign that it seems like we're kind of turning a corner on this particular market cycle. It's been a buyer's market for well over 2 years. Pricing has come down anywhere from, in some cases, 13, 15%, in some cases like condos, in excess of 25% just in the last 2 years. So we needed that big price correction. We had a really, really hot market after 2020 when prices really, really ramped up. Demand was super high, inventory was super low. Prices went up really, really fast. We needed it to cool down. Luckily for us down here, that cooling off period happened over the course of a couple of years, and it was a gradual pace. Now people are getting it through their head with some negative press that we've had, and some press showing that the property values have gone down the way they have. Some of that extra inventory that's been overpriced and sitting on the market, those sellers have finally gotten it through their heads. They're not going to get their prices that they were going to get in 2022, and they've taken that property off the market and they're waiting this market cycle out. That absolutely needed to happen, and it's been happening in big numbers. We'll see that inventory tick up as we get into January and February. We always do, just because the demand is higher in those in the first and second quarter of the year. At this point, I don't think we're going to hit the inventory highs that we saw earlier this year. So I think a lot of that inventory that has already come off the market will stay off the market. Some of it will come back on, but a lot of it will stay off the market. And the more that we can do that, the more we can kind of turn this market around and eventually see those prices start to tick back up in the opposite direction. We still have a tremendous amount of demand here in some categories. We've even sold more properties this year than the last couple of years. So demand is still very, very healthy. We've just had an inventory problem, and we're starting to solve that now. So it's good, especially if you're a seller, to see these trends start to happen. And but the very last thing that's going to happen is the pricing trend is going to turn around. So I don't think we have another 10% to go on pricing in terms of prices going down that much more. I think if anything, maybe it'll come down another couple of points, but it's going to start to soften out and flatten out rather. and then eventually we will see those prices start to go back up. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 6 months. Certainly it'll happen more rapidly if the politicians end up getting this property tax removal on the ballot in 2026. If that happens, even for just primary residents, that's going to get priced out in the market somehow. So if you're talking about a $6,000 or $8,000 a year property tax bill that you no longer have to pay, it's going to get priced out one way or the other, and my guess is it's going to get priced out by increasing in overall market values of these properties down here. So the window is closing as a buyer, if you are a buyer in this market, to get into this thing while the values are still low. If you are a seller, hold on for just a little bit longer, maybe another year or so, and we should see these prices start to go trend in the opposite direction, assuming that we don't have any kind of big black swan event, which it doesn't look like we have economically on the horizon. But a lot of positive things happen in the Cape Coral real estate market. If I can do anything for you, if you are looking for something to buy, or if you're looking to sell in the next few months, get a hold of me, call, text, or email me. I'd love to hear about your individual situation and tell you how I can help you out with that. Beyond that, thank you for being here. I know these are very dry videos, but hopefully you got something out of it. If you did get something out of this video, do me a favor, hit the like button. And make sure you subscribe. If you're not subscribed, not only for these videos every single month, but for the weekly videos that I put out every single week, where we're just giving you a lot of really great, useful information and looking at some cool real estate. So I hope you enjoyed your time here. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next video here in just a few days. Thanks.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.